I kind of look at it in a few different ways in terms of like the physiological signs and then also the psychological signs. For me, it was more so like the psychological side of things. And this is what I saw with a lot of my clients too, just really being afraid to eat carbs was the biggest thing. Like I was afraid to eat watermelon or sweet potatoes, like whole food, nutrient dense carbs, because I was just so down that kind of rabbit hole for the few years of being strict keto, low carb. And I did find benefits to being keto, low carb for a long time. But I found that it can be beneficial, and it really just depends on the individual and where you're at and what your overall lifestyle is like, especially what your stress is like. I think stress plays a huge role, and then also activity level and all of that. So I started finding myself just, from the psychological standpoint, being very carb phobic. I started to feel as I started to incorporate carbs a little bit more into my lifestyle, I was having some blood sugar dysregulation. So my body was just so used to not having carbs that it adapted to using obviously more fat for fuel, which can be a good thing. But if you go too far down that rabbit hole, it can kind of backfire on you. So I started to notice that with myself, and obviously, like I mentioned, with a lot of the clients that I was working with over the years, all of these kind of different things started to pop up. They, blood sugar dysregulation, eating carbs, and just kind of what we see on kind of the side of people who are metabolically inflexible, where they've been using carbs for a long time and they maybe have some insulin resistance and they can't utilize those carbs effectively anymore. We actually start to see that on the other side as well, when your body is not used to carbs at all anymore. And so those are a few of the main things that I noticed. Performance, at first it was just like kind of variable, but then as I started to incorporate more carbs and started to be more strategic about what I was doing, my performance started to increase. I just started to feel better overall. My body composition started to actually get better. And then I also took a break from like chronically fasting. I was also down that fasting rabbit hole a lot. So that the break from fasting, I think, helped as well. And I think that really just has to do a lot with the stress component of things. So just getting your stress to regulate and paying attention to that was a huge component for me. Definitely focus. I mean, just overall, when we're thinking about nutrition, practically, like the more whole foods your diet is, no matter what kind of camp you're in, the better off you're going to be with, satiety, getting enough nutrients, focusing on those whole foods, especially whole foods carbs, bringing those back in, regulation of blood sugar, all of that. But there was also another component of it where I was kind of on that psychological side of things. I was just like, I thought that if I ate a piece of cake or a donut, that I would just like blow up. So that was another side of things that I worked on, and that's what I work on with my clients as well, realizing that like if we can keep about like 80 to 90% of our, overall day whole foods, as close to nature as possible. I like to say either had a face at some point or have grown from the earth at some point. If you can, majority of your food can fall into those two categories, then you're probably doing pretty good. And then just bringing you back to reality. Like we know, if you go to an event or you have a birthday party or something like that, if you eat a piece of cake, it's not going to be the end of the world. So it's just kind of balancing those things out.